The Tennis Gambling Podcast and the Sports Game Podcast Network is brought to you by Nordic Fantasy. You can win a ton of times your money, and it's a ton of fun. Use promo code SGPN to claim your special pick and a first-time deposit offer up to $250 in bonus cash on Nordic Fantasy, promo code SGPN. We're also brought to you by the Mega Memorial Day merch sale. 15% off everything in the SGPN merch store with the promo code SGPNMay. And welcome, everybody, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast here on the Sports Game Podcast Network. It is currently Saturday afternoon on May 25th, roughly 3:15 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm your host, always, Scott Reichel, once again going solo for this pod. It's going to be a fun day because we have two tournaments to actually preview, or I should say 2 episodes to have for the same tournament. We have the WTA French Open and the ATP French Open. So we're going to cover each of them in separate episodes, both of them coming out today. So stay tuned for another episode in a couple of hours. Going to do the women's tournament first. So that's going to be the game plan. To get into, though, the actual reminders before we get into any of the recaps for the previous episode, do want to remind me once again to like, subscribe on YouTube. Also a reminder to rate and review the podcast on Spotify or Apple. Also a reminder that we have a lot of great content on the SGPN merch store, including Tennis Gambling Podcast merch. We have shirts, we have sweatshirts, high quality, different colors, different designs. So I recommend you checking out the website for that. Also, besides just the Tennis Gambling Podcast merch, we have a lot of great other shows that have merchandise as well. And a reminder that you can get 15% off everything with the promo code SGPNMay for the Mega Memorial Day merch sale. So keep that in mind as it's going to be ending after this weekend. And a reminder that the featured show from the network this week will be the overall racing podcast. We have the NASCAR Gambling Podcast and the F1 Gambling Podcast. So it's the biggest week in racing. You have the Indy 500, Monaco Grand Prix, and the Coke 600. Rod and Cody from the NASCAR Gambling Podcast and the F1 Gambling Podcast have you covered. So make sure to join their Kyle Larson diecast card giveaway. That's free to enter. And you could also do so by going to sportsgamepodcast.com/race to register and to make sure to subscribe to the NASCAR Gambling Podcast and the F1 Gambling Podcast. Now, for the actual game plan for this episode, going to be doing the same thing we usually do for the outrights. Going to be going into the recap of the previous episode first, and we'll also recap the 2 finals on the women's side that took place on Saturday. Then we'll get into the actual quarters. We have quarter odds. We'll get into the quarters, then the outright picks for the entire event, and then we'll get into the lock and dog picks for the first round at the end of the show. So getting started with the actual recap of the previous episode, ended up splitting the lock and dog picks. Should have potentially been a sweep there, but Perricard choked away the final service game as he ended up blowing a chance for us to sweep back-to-back episodes. For the lock, though, did give out a -170 as we gave up Perricard over half a break at -170. Never in doubt, broke 2 times in the first set, ended up flying over. I was going to take it blindly. I mentioned the trends in the last episode. You saw Echeverry get broken at least 1 time in 28 of his first 30 matches this season, and it was -170. We're going to take that blindly, and now that's 29 out of 31. So never in doubt, had to lay 170, and it cashed easily. For the dog, we had the no tiebreak at +120. Heartbreaker went to 3 sets, and then you ended up having Perricard up a break at 6-5, and then he ended up choking 2 volleys pretty badly to hand over the break on a platter, and that's how I picked up a loss. So a bit of a heartbreaker there. Should have been a sweep, was not, is what it is, but on the bright side, did end up winning an outright. We had Ruud to win Geneva, and he did at +333. So overall, nice episode, and hopefully that carries over into the French Open. Time to get into the actual recap, though, of the Saturday matches. We're not going to recap the Ruud and the Perricard titles. We're going to save that for the men's breakdown in a couple hours. Instead, we're going to talk about the women's, because you had 2 women's title matches. You had one in Rabat and you had one in Strasbourg, and you saw Keys absolutely dominate against Collins. Destruction. Not the outcome I expected, and definitely not the margin I thought, because Keys won 6-1, 6-2. Absolute bloodbath. And Keys, if you actually look at the betting odds, was the dog in the match. She was +130, and she dominated 6-1, 6-2. Besides that, though, Stearns also dominated. Same exact scoreline, but reverse, as she won 6-2, 6-1. And she was also a massive underdog in the match. You're looking at her being around +240. So the underdogs did quite well, and you saw Sharif and Collins basically no-show the title matches, as you had 2 Americans winning clay titles entering the French Open. So we'll see what happens. I know Keys' odds in the French Open did dip because of her performance over the weekend, so we'll see what happens moving forward. Either way, though, not much else to recap. Point is, you saw 2 very, very underwhelming, straightforward WTA finals, 250s finals on Saturday, and hopefully the French Open's a bit more competitive than that. I do want to briefly mention Keys' run throughout the event because she was dominant. In fact, she did not drop a set in the entire event. Keys ended up beating the likes of Wang, Lynette, Samsonova, and ended up beating Collins in straight sets. She was just absolutely possessed. Besides the first set, which was 7-5 against Wang, she actually did not drop a single... she did not drop more than 3 games in a set the rest of the way. So Keys was on the warpath, and she ended up dominating. Good for her. But the margin in every set was definitely noteworthy because when you win each set, each of the last, I should say, 7 sets of your tournament run by 3+ games, you're dialed in. And she was dialed in. Collins also had not dropped a set before that, too. So Collins was in great form. Made a very solid run in Rome before losing to Sabalenka in straight sets, and then ended up making it to the final in Strasbourg. So she was in good form. He's just killed her. End of the story. And for Stearns, she had a good run. Definitely not the easiest path for her, as Stearns had back-to-back marathons against Bronzetti and against Tomova, and that ended up being I'd say the most difficult path that she had because the final was a cakewalk. So either way, point is she had 2 extremely tough matches where she ended up beating Bronzetti 6-4, 4-6, 7-5, then beat Tomova 6-7, 7-5, 7-6, and you kind of thought she was going to be struggling because Sharif ended up not dropping a set in the entire event before the final, and it did not matter as Stearns beat her comfortably. So that's going to do it for the actual recap of the Saturday matches on the women's side. Now it's time to get into the actual preview of the French Open for the women. But before we get into any of that, I do want to quickly remind everybody once again that we are brought to you by Nordic Fantasy. The NBA playoffs are here, and our sponsor, Nordic Fantasy, wants to make it a lot more interesting. Nordic Fantasy is easiest place with fantasy sports, and they have a great pick'em game, which is as simple as selecting higher or lower on player stats like points, rebounds, assists, and so much more. Make entries of all basketball or mix and match across favorite sports, and you can win up to 10 times your money, and it's a ton of fun. And if you also want to look at how available Underdog is, available in 30+ states, including California, Texas, and even Canada, they also have a lot of great options for tennis. They have breaks of serve, they have aces, double faults, a lot of fun ways to make tennis viewing more interesting. And a reminder that they also have a lot of great promotions. They have bonus cash airdrops, specials, giveaways, and more throughout the playoffs. So make sure to follow @UnderdogPicks on Twitter. Keep an eye out. It's available in 30+ states, including California, Texas, and even Canada. They also just launched Champions, their player versus player format in Florida. Sign up with the promo code SGPN to claim your special pick and a first-time deposit offer up to $50 in bonus cash. Underdog Fantasy, promo code SGPN. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast. Just finished recapping the Saturday matches on the women's side and our lock and dog picks. Now it's time to move on into the actual preview for the French Open for the women, starting off with the usual order of operations, going through the recent winners of the event. Swiatek has owned the event. She has been dominant. She's won 2 straight years. She's won 3 of the last 4. To go through the path, though, she did beat Mukova in a marathon last year, beat Goff in straight sets the year prior. Krejcikova did end up winning a title. That was a competitive match, but she ended up winning. Swiatek ended up beating Kenin, and you saw Barty beat Vondrousova in the final a couple years ago. Point is, though, the real story of the event is pretty simple. Can anybody dethrone Iga? And we'll find out, because Iga in this event, I know I'm going to save the outright odds for later, she's -160 to win the entire event. Now, I am going to spoil it. I am not taking -160 in a women's tournament. I'm just not going to happen. Now, I know that Iga should be a minus favorite. I know that she's a phenomenal clay player, and if she won, it would obviously not shock anybody. I'm not taking 160 in a WTA tournament, especially in a Grand Slam. That's not going to happen. We know that you can expect the unexpected in most of these Grand Slams on the women's side, and I do think that there is no value whatsoever on Swiatek to get the job done. Potentially, if you wanted to get her to win in straight sets, that I should say you can get her to win without dropping a set in the entire tournament. I would take that prop if it was at like 5 or 6 to 1. It's at 330. Pass. There's really no value on Swiatek. I'm not going to bother. So if you're expecting me to blindly take chalk in this event, I'm not going to do it. That is simply put not a good investment in my opinion. Now to get into the actual quarters, starting off with the first quarter, you have Swiatek, which I was alluding to a second ago, being a big favorite. She's -370. Once again, shop your lines, though, for the quarter odds. You have Collins at 7 to 1 after getting killed by Keys in the final on Saturday. You have Vondrousova at 16 to 1, Osaka at +2,000, and Krejcikova at 35 to 1. So on paper, actually a really difficult quarter for Iga. You figure with Collins being in great form, Vondrousova made the final here a couple of years ago. Osaka's been on the comeback trail, and she's been pretty decent in her comeback. Definitely not a threat to actually win a Grand Slam title, but she is still dangerous. And that would be a second-round match for Swiatek, which is not easy. And you have Krejcikova, who's been really bad lately, but she did win a title here a couple years ago. So not exactly the easiest draw for the two-time defending champion. I'm not going to go with any of the longer shots. I don't think you're going to see a super Cinderella run here. That might be in another quarter. Point is, though, I'm not taking Iga at minus 370. Not going to happen. I do think she's probably going to win the quarter. She's probably going to win the event, but no value. So I'm going to move on to the other options. Give me Collins at 7-1. I know she just lost the keys comfortably, but she was in really good form before that match, and I do think that she can keep it interesting. She had Iga on the ropes in the Australian Open before letting her off the hook. I do think that Collins can make it interesting against Iga. So I think 7-1 is a pretty good price for a player that's been in great form all year long. As for the other option, give me Vondrousova at 18-1. I know her form's inconsistent, but we know that she is very capable of having Cinderella runs, as we saw her win Wimbledon. And she was about 150-1 to win Wimbledon, but she made the final of the French Open a couple years ago, and 18-1 for a former finalist to make a deep run, I think is a decent price. Krejcikova, I know, is 35-1, so you could argue the same logic applies. The issue is she has been in insanely bad form. I don't really see any value on her. You can make an argument for her, but she's been really bad. Not going to bother. Vondrousova's been hit or miss, so I do think that there's always upside for her because she plays such a unique style of just using her overall length and size to keep the ball in play and to force unforced errors. And I do think if she gets comfortable on the clay, she can definitely outlast a lot of players and make the match interesting. So I do think Vondrousova at 18-1 is a worthy long shot for the first quarter. Once again, if Iga wins the quarter, that's expected. No value. Give me Collins at 7-1 and give me Vondrousova at 18-1 as the value plays, in my opinion, for this quarter. Moving on to the second quarter, you have Goff as the favorite. Goff is around even money. Ostapenko's around 550. Jabeur is 750. Maya is around, or Haddad Maya is around 9-1. Samsonova is 12-1. You have Leylah Fernandez at 18-1. Caroline Garcia, if you want to go for a home country angle, is 30-1. Point is, I'm not going with Goff. I know Goff made a final here 2 years ago. I really can't stand Goff, at least based on betting, because she is so inconsistent and it drives me nuts. And we know the unforced error count can be a concern. The serving can be an issue with double faults. I just don't trust her at even money, and I think that this actual quarter is pretty difficult. So I'm not going to go with Goff. I'm going to go elsewhere. Ostapenko did win the French Open many years ago. I'm not going to pick her, though, at 550. Not the easiest first-round match. I'll get into that match later on in the show. Point is, though, I do think that her path is actually not the easiest, and Ostapenko can also be a head case. If she makes a deep run, I would not be shocked at 550. Not going to take her, though. I do think that I just don't exactly like how Ostapenko's draw unfolded for her, and as a result, I am going to pass. However, I am going to go with Jabeur at 750. I know Jabeur has been pretty inconsistent recently, but we know that she can make deep runs in Grand Slam events. She's not going to win the event, but she can make it to the quarters of the semis, and I do think 750 is a pretty decent path. She is, or at least a decent overall price for her path. She is a massive favorite in the first round against Vickery. So I do think that Jabeur should have a pretty decent opening to the event. And I think because of that, she should be able to avoid any early upsets and hopefully the draw bounces in her favor. That's kind of the issue I have with Ostapenko. I think Ostapenko has a difficult draw into the first round, but facing off against Vickery as a minus 600 favorite in the first round is not bad. Jabeur also just buried Ostapenko in Madrid, winning 6-4, 6-0, 6-4. So I do like the fact that she was able to beat Ostapenko. She also was able to beat Leylah Fernandez in straight sets in Madrid as well. So she has actually beaten a couple of players in her quarter within the last month, which I think is a good sign. Now, she did lose to Kenin in the first match in Rome in 3 sets. It was a tough match. Lost to Keys in 3 sets in Madrid. Turns out, though, that was actually a decent loss because Keys won a title on clay about a week or 2 later. She also won via bagel in the first set. So Jabeur's in pretty good form. I know that she's a bit of a head case, and I know that her overall game tends to struggle against top tier competition. But I think Goff can be vulnerable, and I do think that Jabeur's value at 750. And for my other option, I did find a better price on Adad Maya. Give me 12 to 1. I think 12 to 1 is a great price. At the end of the day, you have a player who made the semifinals here last year. She really had Iga on the ropes in the semis and unfortunately could not close the deal. But 12 to 1 for a historically good clay player who actually has had success against top-tier competition in the past, I think is worth something. I think 12 to 1 is worth consideration, and I think that this price definitely feels a bit off. Now, Adad Maya has not exactly been in great form recently. She's been fine, just hasn't exactly been dominant per se. But I think 12 to 1 is a good price. Give me those two as my picks for the second quarter. As I'm fading Goff, I don't see much value in her at even money. Moving on to the third quarter, you have Rybakina's quarter, where she's a plus 140. Shop around, though. I saw a minus 125, and I found a plus 140. So a lot of disparity in the quarter market prices. So check that out. But Rybakina is the favorite at plus 140. You have Zhang as the second favorite at 450. You have Svitolina at 7 to 1, Paolini at 8 to 1, and then you have a bunch of options who I think personally have no chance. So for the actual options in this quarter, I really went chalk here. Rybakina has been in great form, and I really can't go against her. So I am going to go with Rybakina at plus 140. She has won 13 of her last 15 matches on clay, or I should say in general. So she's been in great form, and I just think that she's in line for a good showing here. Give me Rybakina at plus 140 is my only pick to win the third quarter. And last but not least, we have the fourth quarter, which is the Sabalenka quarter. So you might end up having a Rybakina versus Sabalenka semi, which would be incredible. But you're looking at the odds here, and Sabalenka does have a pretty decent quarter. Minus 125, you have Sakari at 550, Andreeva at 8 to 1, and you have Keys at 8 to 1 as well. Kasatkina is 10 to 1. And if you want to go for some long shot name recognition, you have Badoza at 22 to 1, and you have Azarenka at 35 to 1. Sloane Stephens as well is at 35 to 1. Now for this one, I did go chalk. I did go with Sabalenka. I potentially would have considered Keys, but I do think that the price has dropped too much after watching her win in Strasbourg. So I feel like I missed the value already on Keys, so I'm not going to bother with her in this one. Sakari, I don't trust. Andreeva, I don't think has a chance in hell. I think Andreeva's odds are insane at 8 to 1. I think she should be a lot higher. I think Keys should be the, in my opinion, second favorite to win the quarter. You can argue Sakari is still good on clay and she is more rested than Keys, but the point is I do think Sabalenka is the best player here by far, and I do think that she is going to make a deep run in the French Open. I'm not saying she's going to win the whole thing, but I do think that minus 125 to win the quarter is pretty decent for what I think is a pretty manageable quarter for at least compared to the other favorites in this tournament. So that's going to wrap it up for the actual quarter picks. Once again, the first quarter, I'm going to go with Collins, and I am going to go with Vondrousova. Collins at plus 700 and Vondrousova at 18 to 1. For the second quarter, I am going to go with Jabeur at 750, and I am going to go with Adad Maya at 12 to 1. For the third quarter, give me Rybakina, and I do think that she is going to be really, really on the just in a great spot to potentially win the title here. So keep an eye out for that. But the point is, I do think plus 140 for a pretty easy quarter is a good deal. And the fourth quarter, give me Sabalenka at minus 125. Now time to move on to the actual title options, who I think is going to win the event. Starting off with the odds, you have once again Swiatek at minus 160. Not going to take that under any circumstances. Sabalenka is around plus 550. Goff is a 9 to 1. Rybakina is 10 to 1. Collins is 20 to 1. Ostapenko is 40 to 1. You have Sakari at 50 to 1. Zhang is 50 to 1. Andreeva 60 to 1. Keys is 65 to 1. Jabeur is 65 to 1. Kasatkina is 80 to 1. And if you want to go for Vondrousova, 80 to 1 as well. Adad Maya is around 100 to 1. Now, assuming for a second that Iga does not win the event, we can expect chaos. I feel like that's a pretty standard opinion for WTA Grand Slams, where if the immediate favorites are not going to win, it's anybody's race, and you might end up seeing maybe one of the super favorites face off against a serious Cinderella, and at that point, you can maybe hedge out of it. But I think for the sake of this tournament, not looking at Iga because there's no value, I did go with some chalk. I took Sabalenka at 650. I found a 650, and I did take Rybakina at 10 to 1. I like their draws. I think Rybakina's draw is especially great for a 10 to 1. So if I had to pick my favorite outright, it would be Rybakina at 10 to 1 compared to Sabalenka. I just think the odds are better for her, and she has won 13 of her last 15 matches. She's been in great form. I do think that's worth something So I think 10-1 is a very good price on Rybakina. And I did go with one long shot. So I have two somewhat shorter choices with Sabalenka and Rybakina. However, I do have one super long shot, and it will be Haddad Maia at 110-1. I do think that making the semis last year tells me she can hang in there, and she almost, I don't want to say pulled off the upset against Swiatek in the semis, but she definitely gave Iga all she could handle and then some. I'm not saying she's going to officially win the event, but 110-1, I think, is a good long shot flyer. We know Jabeur can make a run. Jabeur, though, I don't trust to actually win the title in. If you want to take her at 65-1, point is, though, I think I'm going to stick with a couple of options that I think are realistic and potentially mispriced. Vondrousova at 80-1 I thought about, but I don't think she's going to actually win the event. I just liked her overall price to win the quarter. So once again, my picks for the outrights in the Women's French Open, I'm going to go with Sabalenka at plus 650. I'm going to go with Rybakina at 10-1, and I am going to go with the semifinalists from last year at 110-1, Haddad Maia. That's going to wrap it up, though, for the actual outright picks for the French Open. Now it's time to move on to the actual lock and dog picks for the first round. However, before we continue that, do want to remind you once again that we are brought to you by Rhythm, because we're currently in the middle of the NBA playoffs. And if you are looking to bet on NBA player props, then you need to get Rhythm, because Rhythm gives you a menu of the best player props for every single NBA playoff game, making it easy to go through. And you also can find the best props to put your money on in seconds. Rhythm's predictions are backed by over 3 years of data and a team of data scientists and quants that focus on fine-tuning the algorithm to give you the best chance at winning. Rhythm pairs their predictions with player prop graphs to help you feel even more confident with your picks, whether it involves DFS or your own bets. From superstars to bench players, Rhythm has player prop lines on everybody, all backed by AI data without you needing to endlessly scroll a sports book. They also allow you to create your own custom NBA models, so you can get AI-backed money line, spread, and total picks for every playoff game. Start your free 7-day trial and start winning your NBA player props with Rhythm. Available wherever you do get your apps. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast. We've finished previewing the Women's French Open. Now it's time to get into the actual lock and dog picks for the first round. Starting off with the lock, I am going to go with a two-pick parlay. First pick, I'm going to take Rybakina to win in straight sets. Second pick will be Haddad Maia on the money line in her match against Cocchiaretto. To get into the actual odds, though, you can parlay those two at minus 132. Rybakina is a minus 2,000 favorite. She's going to probably cruise in that match. She's won 13 of her last 15. She's in great form. I think she rolls and wins this match comfortably. As for Haddad Maia, she has won 6 of her last 9. So she's been once again in good form. Not amazing form, but good form. And Cocchiaretto has been struggling. She's lost 5 of her last 8, but I think Haddad Maia is just a tier above in terms of talent, and I do think that her money line is a little bit cheap in the 220 range, give or take. But I am going to go with the two together. I think that this is a pretty cheap parlay for two, I'd say safe outcomes, and as a result, I am going to take it. So once again, the lock will be on Rybakina to win in straight sets, parlayed with the Haddad Maia money line at minus 132. And for the dog, I am going to go to the over 2.5 sets in the Ostapenko match against Christian, and the over 2.5 sets is plus 150. Christian has been an absolute magnet to 3 sets. Sounds crazy, but it's true. Christian's gone to 3 sets in 6 straight matches. So she has been constantly involved in marathons. Ostapenko has gone to 3 sets as well in 2 of her last 3 matches. We know that she's a very streaky player who constantly tries to hit winners, and as a result, the unforced error count can get wild in her matches. But she's streaky, and Christian's been a very, very consistent 3-set goer, and I do think because of that, you might end up seeing it unfold into a 3-set war in the first round. Plus, if you want to go through the head-to-head meeting, they faced off one time in their careers. On hard court, match did go to 3. So you're looking at a player who's gone to 3 sets in 6 straight. Player's gone to 3 sets in 2 of the last 3. Only a TED meeting went to 3 sets, and it's plus 150. I like the odds. I'll take it. I think you might see a marathon breakout between those two. So once again, my picks for the actual show, the lock's going to be on Rybakina to win in straight sets, parlayed with Haddad Maia money line, and that 2-pick pays out at minus 132. Let me just quickly update that just to make it clear. Rybakina 2-0 and Haddad Maia money line, and that pays out at minus 132 for the 2-pick parlay. For the dog, give me Christian and Ostapenko over 2.5 sets at plus 150. That's going to wrap it up for this episode. A reminder, we're back once again for the French Open breakdown in a couple hours. But until then, find me on Twitter at Reichel Radio. Find me on the NBA show. Find me on the NFL show. Find me on the MLB show and the WNBA show. Until next time, though, good luck to all of you and all of your bets. Bye, everyone.